For decades, Iran thought it had a lifeline. When the world turned its back on Iran, when the sanctions crushed their economy, when their currency collapsed, Iran always knew it had at least one friend it could count on. That was the plan. That was Iran's ace in the hole. As of today, that ace just got yanked right off the table. In a development that's absolutely stunned the geopolitical world, the final lone Iranian ally is officially an ally no more. But why? What happened? Why the obvious betrayal? The answer to that question will change everything you thought you knew about Trump's grand strategy and what this war is really all about. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Something absolutely massive is happening right now in the Iran war, and it all centers around one of Iran's last remaining allies, the Russian Federation. President Putin just did something nobody saw coming. Russian officials are calling on Iran to end the hostilities.
We believe that the situation should have transitioned to a political and diplomatic settlement as early as yesterday. This is the only thing that can effectively contribute to diffusing the catastrophically tense situation that has now developed in the region.
That's the Kremlin's own spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, publicly calling on Iran to stand down. And it's not just Peskov. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, he personally called Iran's foreign minister and told him, you need to agree to a ceasefire, like as of now. And it's not just Russia, interestingly enough. It's also another major ally of Iran, China. In a stunning turnaround, a spokesperson announced that China has reversed course and will not be selling Iran advanced CM-302 supersonic anti-ship missiles as they had previously promised. In other words, China made it absolutely clear they were not getting involved in this conflict. No CM-302s, no air defense systems, no targeting data, no satellite cueing, nothing that would drag them into direct confrontation with Trump. But the major disappointment, indeed betrayal for Iran, is definitely Russia. We have to understand that over the years, what appeared to be a very powerful alliance formed between the Iranian regime and the Russian Federation. So if we go back to the pivotal year of 1979, prior to that, Iran was led by a pro-American monarchy, right? The Shah, the Pahlavi dynasty. And in the decade leading up to that year, Iranian relations with other pro-American Middle Eastern power, Saudi Arabia in particular, were highly cooperative and friendly, Israel as well. But all that changed when the exiled religious leader Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran as the leader of a powerful and ultimately successful Islamic revolution. With Iran led by Shiites and Saudi Arabia by Wahhabi Sunnis, the two nations aligned themselves geopolitically with the two opposing Cold War powers. So Saudi Arabia went with the United States, while Iran went with the Soviet Union. After the fall of communism in 1991, Russian and Iranian relations actually grew closer. And this was largely due to the resurgence of religious sentiment in the renewal of Russian orthodoxy within the Federation. Now, this alliance grew even stronger with the eruption of civil war inside of Syria in 2011. Both Russia and Iran were concerned that the Syrian civil war would end up resulting in a pro-Western, pro-NATO regime in Syria, which it ultimately did, but they were nevertheless both determined to stop that. Both countries provided crucial support to the Syrian government under President Bashar al-Assad while pursuing their own strategic interests in the region. And that's when Russia and Iran began coordinating their military activities and shared intelligence to support the Assad regime's military operations. The Russian military provided air support to Iranian-backed ground forces, facilitating their offensives against opposition groups, including ISIS. And in return, Iran allowed Russia to use its air bases for conducting airstrikes in Syria. And this growing alliance grew even stronger after the U.S. sanctions on Russia hit full force in retaliation for their invasion of Ukraine. Overnight, both Russia and Iran suddenly became respectively number one and number two most financially sanctioned states in the world. And so since those sanctions were imposed, Russian imports to Iran rose by more than 27%, while Iranian exports to Russia rose by more than 10%. And as NATO militarily supplied Ukraine, Iran comparably militarily supplied Russia. Iranian manufactured kamikaze drones. We've seen them in this conflict, the Shahed 136. They were deployed by Russia in Ukraine solely by way of Iran's supply chain. So the two nations have grown extremely close. And the fact that Russia has basically now turned its back on Iran is utterly staggering. As one ex-account put it, Iran has only 3 allies left: the UN, CNN, and the Democrat Party. So what's really going on here with Russia? Why is Russia so quickly abandoning its once very close ally? That's exactly what we're about to find out. But first, gang, we all like to think that COVID is behind us. But what if the effects are still lingering in the body, especially in the brain? A new study from New York University found something alarming. People suffering from long COVID showed changes in a part of the brain responsible for protecting and cleansing brain tissue. Researchers are linking this to chronic inflammation and early warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. Now, this may help explain why more than 20 million Americans are still dealing with long COVID symptoms like fatigue, shortness of breath, and that frustrating brain fog. Scientists believe ongoing inflammation and spike protein exposure may be disrupting the brain's natural cleanup system. The wellness company's Ultimate Spike Detox is your solution. Created with guidance from Dr. Peter McCullough, this formula was designed to support the body's natural detox process and inflammatory balance. It contains 4 times the nattokinase found in most spike products, along with bromelain, turmeric, and selenium to support circulation and cellular cleanup. If lingering inflammation and spike protein exposure are part of the problem, supporting your body's detox systems may be one of the smartest things you can do. Give your brain a break. Get your bottle of Ultimate Spike Detox today. Head on over to twc.health/Turley and use code Turley to get 15% off. Again, that's twc.health/Turley and use code Turley to get 15% off. Bottom line, a powerless Iran is useless to Russia. You got to get that. Geopolitics can be very, very cruel, right? In the end, geopolitics is all about power. And if you ain't got power, then you got no leverage, right? With Iran so thoroughly decimated economically, remember the rial, their currency, has lost 20,000% of its value since 1979. So with it so thoroughly decimated economically and now so thoroughly decimated militarily with upwards of 90% of their military capability wiped out, Iran is frankly useless to them, to Russian forces at this point. But as it turns out, that appears to have been very intentional on Trump's part. Analysts are calling it a reverse Kissinger, right? Henry Kissinger's grand strategy was to keep China and Russia separated from one another. And that's why the Nixon administration pursued détente with China and drew them into the WTO and opened up the world's markets to China. It was all an attempt to get China to pivot away from the Soviet Union. And it worked. In fairness, it worked. It helped end the Cold War. It helped starve the Soviet Union while economically lifting up China. Analysts are arguing that Trump is doing a reverse Kissinger or reverse Nixon in that he's actively wooing Russia away from China. Trump wants to run the same play, but in reverse. Instead of befriending China to isolate Russia, he wants to befriend Russia to isolate China. Trump has actually been very open about this. He's said on numerous occasions that his goal is to, in his words, quote, united Russia and China. Ununited Russia and China, right? Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been even blunter. He warned that if Russia becomes China's permanent junior partner, then you've got two massive nuclear superpowers aligned against the United States. And that ain't good. It ain't good for America, for Europe, or for the world. So once you realize that, then Trump's approach to the Ukraine war and to like yelling at Zelensky in the Oval Office and so on, that all now starts to make perfect sense. Ending the war means accommodating Russia precisely because such accommodation would come with the carrot of pulling Russia back from Beijing's orbit. Because right now, China's literally subsidizing Russia's war economy to the tune of over $100 billion a year in below-market oil and goods. The more Russia needs China, the more leverage China has over Moscow. So Trump wants to provide all kinds of economic incentives to get Putin to turn away from Xi and embrace the newly awakened network multipolarity of the American civilization state that we've been talking so much about on this channel. So if you don't know, Trump is aligning, first and foremost, the whole of the Western Hemisphere around the U.S. core. And then he's linking that alignment across the Atlantic via NATO. Then that link extends into the Middle East via the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords. The Accords link to India and South Asia via the I-2U2. So that links Israel in the Mediterranean all the way to India and the Indian Ocean. And then that links into Southern and Western Pacific via the Quad. The Quad is an alliance between the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan. So Trump has, in effect, created a networked civilizational alliance that extends all across the globe. And he's basically giving Putin an open invitation to join that alliance, whose ultimate purpose is to push back against China and their Belt and Road Initiative. And with the collapse of Iran, it frankly looks like Putin will have few reasons to stay with the old alliance. So this new alliance that's emerging and the carrots that's being extended to Putin explain not only why Russia's turning its back on Iran, but also why this Iranian war is literally creating an entirely new world order.
Love the channel? You'll love Patriot Alerts even more. Free daily news and my weekly wrap-up straight to your inbox. Sign up for free by scanning the QR code below.